Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych.
Hello, welcome to the show. What are we talking about today, Rich?
We are talking about the pitfalls of working at home.
That's right.
A lot of people are working at home now.
It's how to work from home without bringing your work home. Copyright.
Wow. That sounds really wonderfully confusing, but I'll just surf the wave.
Well, I'm a bit of a self-proclaimed expert in this department because actually what people are learning right now during the old house arrest, stay-at-home order, is some of it, I would say, that I learned when we first started the telehealth company. And you reminded me, you and I talked about this years ago and some of the struggles I was having at the beginning. And part of being a self-proclaimed expert is also being self-proclaimed ignorant to it because I had forgotten a lot of the hurdles that people are currently struggling with. So that's why this was such an ingenious idea and topic to talk about today. I'm really glad our producers came up with this. Wait, we don't have producers.
We are producers.
Okay.
By the way, I just downloaded the brilliance of what you said. How to work at home without bringing your work home.
Yeah, that's the title of it.
You have to divide work and home when you work at home.
Yeah, and some of this is more basic, like what I want to start talking about is like time management. When I say basic, I mean simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, but conceptually, I think a lot of people kind of understand that versus some of the more esoteric and into which we will spin off into the proverbial rabbit hole in which you and I like to delve. So I don't know, let's start with time management. What are people learning? What are people struggling with right now in terms of managing their time working from home?
Well, my old housemate, sort of my big brother, was a writer, and he told me the hardest thing about being a writer was you never had to do it. So he was very disciplined about setting a schedule of when he would write. It worked for him. He actually finished the book. So not having to set a schedule is a downfall, I think, sometimes. But more than that is the distractions that we have at home.
I think that was one of the first things that I said, and I was just sort of giving it lip service, like, man, it's really hard to do this, telehealth thing when I got kids banging on the door. Why's the door locked, Dad? Or, the dog barking, or you got delivery people coming, or food. I got a stocked fridge of all kinds of goodies. Those are distractions I wouldn't normally have on the office. And not for me personally, but one of the other ideas we came up with is online shopping. People are more likely to be distracted with pornography. Again, I mentioned that because 25% of the country looks at it, me being in the majority, But any of those distractions at home that don't exist at work, that's what you're saying.
I think that people have routines at home that they run. When I started doing the online therapy from home, at the end of my session, I'd get up, maybe I'd have a bathroom break, or I'd go get a glass of water, and then I would get these pretzels, and the dogs would come running around because they heard the pretzel jar open, and I'd want to feed them and play with them a little bit, and all of a sudden I'm 15 minutes late for my next appointment because my routine at home would be to feed and play with the dogs and do whatever, or answer questions from anybody who was there. And I had to become very, very disciplined in order not to fall into my ordinary home routines.
Now, I'm assuming you're talking about a non-therapy dog because, therapy dogs is a whole different ball of wax. And Marlene, wherever you are somewhere out there, you know who I'm talking about because you bring your service animal, your emotional support dog, to work. And not only all of your patients are distracted, but all the other coworkers are like, oh, let me pet the dog. So that's proof. That's proof that dogs and kids and other distractions or items, we should call them, I guess, that aren't normally at home or at work are now at
Well,
home.
and it disrupted the dogs' routines too, I think, because the dogs would sit outside my office. They'd hear me talking in there. They'd sit outside the office. I don't know if they were guarding the place or they just thought it was pretty weird that I was there all day long and what sounded like talking to myself, which, that is a little odd. The
Actually,
other
that's a
thing
fun joke. I've made that a joke with patients a long time. Because when I first started seeing them and they were very uncomfortable, kind of as people are now, that was one of the jokes I'd make when their kid went streaking through the background, or their dog or their cat would step on the keyboard. I would joke and say, your dog is really concerned that you're talking to computer. I mean, you gotta cut the dog credit. So in the dog's defense,
So we got the distractions, and it also helps to keep a schedule because some people can't stop working.
Oh yeah. Yeah, when you're at home, it's like the day never ends, or you're like, well, I'm not as much of in a rush, and if I just do this one little thing, like get up to take a break, or go look at that hobby or project that I want, or God forbid, my kids are right through the door, they just want a hug every now and then. Those things add up, and mentally you're kind of bookmarking it, like, well, I'm not under a time pressure, I can do that later. And then you see your work day encroaching more and more into your home life. And so it becomes this blurred boundary, and people really struggle with how do you separate work from personal life when you're in that space. And
I think that there's expectations that people who live in the home with you have during that time.
Absolutely. And it's hard for them to change.
Yeah. So the separation of work and personal life becomes an issue because it literally is blurred at that moment.
Yeah, and I don't think it's easy for anybody. And in some ways, I'm worse than most people. Like I recognize the importance of value and the structure and the routine. And I like to put my work hat on when I go to work. And I speak for you a little bit too, because a lot of times we'll hear things that are pretty awful out of patients, and we don't necessarily bring them home. But if you're physically sitting in your home when you hear these awful things and you're helping people process through life on life's terms under these circumstances, our brains are no different than any other primates. We're going to associate that as to where we were when we heard it. Everybody remembers where they were at 9/11 or JFK. I was in my mommy's tummy. Actually, I was a little pre-tummy. But the associative, and so if you hear this at your home, I think you're more likely to take that emotional energy home with you, because that's where you were when you imbibed that.
Well, I agree. I agree. It's like there's an energetic imprint,
Yes.
and if you're starting to associate the work you have with home, especially if it's frustrating, or in our cases, we do hear traumatic things. It does put a different flip on the whole thing,
Yeah.
because, and the other thing is, now you and I don't particularly have bosses, but maybe some people do out there. And you don't know how the boss is perceiving you.
I hope my wife isn't listening, because we all have bosses.
Sorry, honey. You're the boss. So
Yes.
how you perceive him, that's up to you. I think for most people.
Whenever I need to move my left arm, I just text her and ask her, and then there it goes. She controls it for me. So we all have bosses.
Well, okay, but most of them might think of us as invisible. We want to work harder to please the boss if they can't see what we're doing. It's funny because the best T-shirt I ever saw said, "Jesus is coming, act busy."
Yes. That's just the same phenomenon, or conversely, you think, well, hey, the boss ain't here. This is my home. I'm king of this here castle. And you either go the other way and you do much less, you do minimum, because there isn't someone there to monitor your work and your progress, and, generally herd cat. Not that I have employees or anything, but you know what I'm spraying.
Well, you know, for most people, of course, not us necessarily, although I do feel a great camaraderie with you, most people find it harder to have team communication or team building when they're working from home. You know, you're in an office, like you're down the hall from me. If I want a consult, I just go, hey, can you help me out here? And usually for a small fee, you will. Um,
Are you kidding?
it's a large
My
fee.
my time, yes, it's a large thing. No, my time is devoted to you altruistically.
I know, I know. But for most people, you know, so they'll send a text or an email. They may not hear for 5 hours.
Just
You
make
know,
sure you have those TPS reports on my desk by Monday morning, okay?
okie dokie.
That's an office space.
If I knew what those reports were, I'd be sure to get them to you.
Don't worry, all 0 of our listeners get that office space reference, which, by the way, I'm a little disappointed in last week's performance because I know that my mom didn't watch because there was 0 views. So I'm sure that everyone's just like waiting to do a Netflix binge watching this weekend of all of our
Well,
shows. But
maybe we should post it and then they'll watch.
I do know what you mean, though, about it's very convenient just to be, you know, I can hear you through the other room, you know, talking bad about me, or hey, I got a question about this, or there's so much information that's communicated both in like little short snippets, even text short, that sometimes we're too busy or in an environment we can't text that you don't get. And like you said, you know, some of the work I do with South Carolina, virtually, it's very difficult. It may take 45 minutes to actually communicate that the patient is there, not there, having trouble, running late. Basic communication can be cut off. And I find that interesting because we're in a connected world with texts and emails and phone calls and all of that, but we don't utilize it as much.
Well, and not only that, but sometimes the technology doesn't work.
Oh, tech trip ups are a big, big nightmare, you know. And people are, and you know, just right before this show, we were trying to, you know, print something, and hey, printer decides it wants to do maintenance, or Windows wants to install updates in the middle of your live broadcast. Knock on wood. Or, you know, I've taught this to my kids: if they have a big project, don't wait until the night before at 10 p.m. when they're supposed to be in bed to rely on Microsoft Word functioning, because there's an invisible force in the universe that makes sure it punishes all procrastinators in this manner.
It's funny. My mother used to say that even before computers existed, but okay.
Really? Well, it's like Murphy's Law, then, but of the digital world.
Absolutely.
You know what else I miss?
What?
I miss water cooler talk. And we actually have a water cooler here. Nobody hangs out around it anymore, but there's a lot of camaraderie, right? There's a lot
Well,
of
yeah, I like the people who are here.
well, I suppose if you hate your job, then you might love being in the comfort of your home and hiding from the boss and doing as little as possible. But, you know, everything that we're talking about is very specific to your profession, and different jobs, different industries. If you work outdoors, if you're roofing, doing landscaping or really hot backbreaking work, that's a very different experience than you and I doing telehealth, and being able, we're fortunate to be able to do a lot of our work and adapt to those changes. And I was extra lucky, or as you said, a visionary, in that I wasn't happy about it, but I recognized this is the way that the country was going, which is kind of interesting because Florida, I would think, would be one of the last states to really swallow this technology. But, you know, out in California and New England, they've relied on telemedicine, telehealth, teleconferencing for many years, but a very small percentage of people were actually doing it. And certainly of that percentage, very few were forced to do it. And now we've all been forced to adapt. And it's hard. It's hard to be invisible.
Well, you know, most people, I think, just whether they really needed to stay at home or they're just scared. At this point, with stay-at-home orders being lifted or partially lifted, people are still scared to go out. And so I've had a lot of my patients just want to continue online, even though I'm back in the office and people can see me personally if they want to. I think there's a fear component to what happened. Now, it may turn out really good because through telehealth, an underserved population can get served. You know, somebody lives in the boonies, they may not be able to drive all the way over here, but we can do a reasonably wonderful job through this. But, you know, I think that for people who are used to jobs where they're on teams, you lose that water cooler effect, the camaraderie, and there's a sense of loneliness of being separate from the group that can take its toll.
Yeah, and forget about team building. I mean, that's difficult to impossible right now. And some professions rely very heavily on team building or teams to even function. Other people, this is actually ironically, and it makes sense when you say it out loud, but a lot of people are happier working from home.
Well, actually, the studies that I read when I was doing a little prep for this is that overall remote workers are happier because there's less stress and you don't have to wear shoes.
Wait, are we supposed to be preparing for this?
Well,
Homework?
Well, you know, I hate to show up and not know anything, which, you know, I often don't.
Well, I showed up, I'm not even wearing pants right now. So, I mean, maybe I'm one of those remote workers that actually.
More information than we actually need, you know, but okay.
Pants, I meant shoes.
Okay.
Underwear. Hey, look, you know, my favorite part is I don't worry about how I smell anymore. You know? Okay,
well, I'm glad to hear that.
It's just a lot less stress.
It's a lot less stress. It can be a lot less stress. How about that?
By the way, due to the overwhelming feedback we've gotten from our viewers, I think the vote, I don't know, we're getting the final tallies in. Yeah, we're gonna check on that. I think I'm gonna shave my beard finally. You know,
okay.
I just didn't want anyone to be shocked when they view, you know, next week, like, who the hell is this guy? You know,
yeah, well,
where are the guys with the beards that I've grown to love?
I'm the Smith brothers. I'm not going to shave
Which
mine.
one's Click and which one's Clack?
Something like that. You know, I would say, now, you've been in this 7 years, and I think I'm in it about 7 weeks now. And I think one of the biggest things for me was, yeah, I was forced to do it. Okay, I was forced to do it. I did it. And it worked better than I expected it to, by the way. But there was a real paradigm shift. You know, I was very invested in the idea that I would be in the room with somebody and I could get information, that I could feel what was going on. And I had to get over my way of thinking. I had the investment I had in just being in the room with a person. So I don't know if other people have that cognitive dissonance, that it's the way I've always done it. It must be the right way.
Well, and I mean, with psychotherapy in general, that's something we learned very early on, is psychiatrists were a little less resistant to a telehealth platform, which is interesting to me because they're MDs. Granted, we don't touch patients in the way primary care or your pulmonologist or your gynecologist. Matter of fact, if we touch patients in that way, of course we get sued. But psychologists, which never have an expectation to touch people in any way, shape, or form, take blood pressure, none of it, they actually had more pushback on this. And I mean, I've struggled with you for years on this, but you were never really opposed to it, I don't think. No. You were just, like you said, the paradigm wasn't there. It hadn't been done. You hadn't really ever beta tested it with patients. You were comfortable with the way things
were. The bottom line was, I didn't have to do it, so why would I want to change it?
Exactly.
Then I had to do it, and I found that it worked, so I was pretty happy about that. But it still was, you know, I'm changing gears on an 18-wheel Mack truck going down Mount Everest. I've been doing it for 30-something years, and now I've got to change, you know, but it turned out it was pretty cool. That paradigm shift, I think, might be bigger for people than you think. For psychologists, and I'm speaking as psychologists, psychotherapists, I felt that I wouldn't be able to catch the nuances, you know, the little tiny micro movements. Right. It turns out I can. And it was not a drop off from what I experienced in the room. And I think for patients, it a lot of them feel it's more convenient, to do it this way.
Well, I mean, and we're getting a little bit off topic. We could do a whole show on this, and you and I have talked about the pros and cons of it. And we're not focused as much on that right now because we are being forced into it. But there were not only was I able to realize some of the tiny nuances you're talking about, body language, looking for medication side effects and extremities, or a lot of the subtle secrets that we do. We also found that I couldn't remember if I saw someone in the office or online. And for me, that proved early on, for me, for what I do, that they were equivalent. If I couldn't remember, like, oh, well, I thought that they might have had, this side effect, but I didn't see it, but it was, I couldn't remember.
I had a very similar experience. I can't really tell the difference in my own experience.
Further off topic, I didn't even realize that there were benefits, and we discovered those early on. When people are in their own home, and it's not totally off topic because it's what we're talking about now, the difficulty in separating your home environment from your work. Well, you're going to behave differently at home than if you're in a doctor's office, staring at a white coat and diplomas on the wall. And, I think I've had maybe one or two patients actually walk out of my office and since my career began. That's not that uncommon for telehealth. People don't like me telling them, hey, I think you have a drinking problem. You better watch that. I've told you before, they just shut off the monitor and go back to playing Xbox. But you and I are living proof. We're living proof that this can work, and the paradigm shift is happening. And much like our previous topic about, the world's changed and it's not going back, we have to make the commitment to look forward. Because right now, I think people have a foot on the boat and a foot on the dock, and they're tearing their groins. And they're going to take the plunge.
Well, but they don't have to, because the research that I read, and I didn't do a voluminous study, is that people who work remotely have less stress and they're actually happier.
Really? I didn't read that study.
Well, I mean, I could send it to you if you like, but for now, maybe you could just take my word for it, because this is science, which means take my word for it.
Oh, I like it. It feels right in the feeling spot. But, I actually still come to the office to do telehealth because for me, it's important that I wear this hat and I'm in this space to get that whole mindset and experience. And a lot of it is just the basics of distractions and schedules and routine and a lot of the pearls that we've discussed today.
I actually find it a lot better to do telehealth from the office than from home, and I am moving in that direction.
That's what's worked out best for me, but your study about working from home, I'm sure
No,
good.
The remote, maybe it wasn't from home. It just said remote workers are happier. So for whatever that's worth.
What we all need is an acceptance. I think we're enough into the pandemic that we realize we've got a foot on the boat and a foot on the dock, and the world has changed. It's not going back. The sooner we accept it, right or wrong, the happier we're going to be. It sort of reminds me of like a cancer patient finally getting the cancer diagnosis officially and feeling relief. It's very counterintuitive, but now they know what they're up against and they can move in a committed different direction. That's what we need to do.
I look at it this way, that, okay, we were forced into this, but we were given a tool that we can use effectively. And as a lot of things come out of, challenge, you stretch yourself a little bit. This can bring a lot of cool stuff into the world. We use it effectively, that's all, like any other tool. But this is a pretty powerful tool, and you can cut yourself on a knife if you're using it, or a saw if you're using it for something. So we just want to be mindful of the sort of the risks and rewards of any intervention, including remote working. We tend to just want to look at things like black and white, it's all good or all bad. I think it's just a matter of being mindful, and that's why we have these conversations.
Well, when we stress, we regress. And I think it's common and understandable for people to be reduced more to black and white thinking, or to be stuck, like we said, a foot on the boat, a foot on the dock, or maybe it's a foot in yesterday and a foot in tomorrow. And the problem is you're peeing all over today. So if we make the commitment to the future, we're going to have that movement and that acceptance. It's sort of the fifth stage of grief. We've gone through the anger and denial and bargaining. And so let's get to acceptance and move on. And these are all terrific tips and pearls. I think this is one of my favorite topics. Disclaimer, I'm going to be saying that every week because our sponsors told me to. But I mean, that's all the time really we have for today. But we have something special next week. What are viewers that tune in going to be seeing next week?
We're going to have a guest.
What?
We're going to have a guest.
Is it one of our viewers?
Well, I don't know if she ever actually looked at the thing, but
she is now.
She will next week. I'll tell you that. This is Samantha Haynes is a licensed massage therapist who is working with me in the emotional shifting process, the mind-body therapy that I developed. And she also does the lymph stuff. She's really excellent. So she has agreed to come and talk about her experiences on alt psych.
Well, join us next week. This has been excellent. Look forward to learning and talking with Samantha Haynes. And as always, remember, be well.
Bye for now.